Now, these are tough times for the SNP. Humza Yousaf's 6.5 months as leader have been overshadowed by the police investigation into the party's finances and policy divisions within the ranks. Public support has fallen in the opinion polls, and last Thursday Labour inflicted a big defeat in the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election. This all makes for an uncomfortable backdrop for the party's annual conference, which starts this Sunday in Aberdeen. Well, to look ahead, we're joined from Edinburgh by the SNP activist Kelly Given, and here in the studio is the SNP MSP and former Minister Ivan McKee and Rachel Amery, who writes on politics for The Scotsman. Thank you all very much indeed. So, Rachel, talk us through what we can expect from the conference.
Yes, the conference gets underway this weekend in Aberdeen. Lots to discuss over the next few days, but I think probably the most interesting thing is the debate on independence strategy, and that's going to be happening on Sunday afternoon. It's a motion put forward by Humza Yousaf and Stephen Flynn, arguably two of the most senior in the SNP itself, and they're arguing that if at the next general election, if the SNP win the most seats in Scotland, that gives them a platform to open negotiations with the UK government for its independence. Now, there's a lot of debate as to whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, because it does rely on the UK government being open to those negotiations, and it also does rely on the SNP winning the most seats. And as we've seen in the by-election last week and some of the recent polling, Labour are doing very well in the polls just now. Some polls have been projecting Labour to win up to 40 seats in Scotland. So those two things are going to be quite key to that independence strategy. It's also quite interesting to see how much of a debate there is within the SNP on this as well, because a group of SNP MPs have put forward an amendment to this motion and they want to see a different approach taken. They're wanting to see the 2026 election used as a de facto referendum instead of the general election.
We'll ask Ivan and Kelly about this a minute. And Tuesday, Humza Yousaf makes his big speech.
Yes, so that's what we're going to look out for as well. It'll be interesting to see how much of his speech reflects what happens on Sunday at this independence debate. OK, so let's address the independence issue then. And Kelly, Rachel's just explained what Humza Yousaf wants to see happen. Nicola Sturgeon's policy was that the SNP would have to win more than 50% of the vote. What's your position? What would you like to see?
I would like to see less of a focus on the bureaucracy of how we get independence. I'm sick of talking about referendums and how we get there and the practical steps. I want to hear more about the policy and why independence is a good idea. I think that's how we win a referendum, and I think that's also how we secure a referendum.
So you want them to explain to the wider public what the vision is? Has that not already been explained over and over the last however many years?
I don't think so, no. I think whilst we've been speaking about independence for a long time, I don't think there's been enough focus on what independence could actually look like and the positives of independence. I think there's been a lot of negativity surrounding the campaign, and I think for the last couple of years that the movement itself has not been galvanised enough and has not been doing enough of what we're best at, which is going out and campaigning. So I'm really excited actually for the next few months ahead and to see what policies Humza Yousaf brings to the table. I think he's doing a good job so far, and I'm looking forward to see what he brings to the table at conference.
So what about the idea of if the SNP get the most seats in the general election next year, that would give some kind of mandate? Would you be in favour of that? I
think that makes sense, yeah. I think, you know, if the Scottish electorate vote for or elect a majority of independent seats, then I think that sends a clear message that they're interested in independence. OK, Ivan, what would you like to see come out of the independence debate?
Well, I think there's a number of strands to this, and it'd be great to unpick all of them. But and Kelly's right. There's a wider context in terms of how we make the argument for independence and how we convince people it's the right route forward for Scotland to tackle the day-to-day problems they see at the moment. But in terms of the specifics of this debate on Sunday and the mechanics round about that, my opinion is that for it to be credible, it needs to be based on the 50% or more, the majority of the votes, because that demonstrates the will of the people. And that gives you a very solid basis for taking a case forward to say that the people of Scotland have decided that they want Scotland to be an independent country. So that was Nicola Sturgeon's policy, 50% plus one. So if you get that in the next general election, what's that a mandate for? Is it a mandate for a referendum, or is it a mandate to start independence talks? In my view, that would be a mandate to start independence talks, and we'll see what the debate is on the conference floor. There's clearly many different opinions on that, and we'll see what the conference decides. But from my perspective, you still believe that the Conservative government or a possible Labour government next year would entertain that? I do, and I think it would be a complete game changer, because at the moment, if you listen to the arguments against it, it's about the people don't want it, there's no appetite for it, the people don't want a referendum, they're not interested in independence, they've got other things to worry about. The moment that there was a 50% plus one vote in favour of a clear policy of independence and a manifesto, and people were clear what they were voting for, and that won the majority support. All of those arguments disappear and you're in a very, very different political environment.
Rachel, what do you think about what Ivan's saying? I mean, would there be credibility there, or is this all academic, this talk? We know what the Conservatives think about it and what Keir Starmer said about it as well.
Yeah, I think the most important thing just now is getting a policy in place that's actually going to work and people know is going to happen. If you look back to 2014, when people knew a referendum was coming, campaigning on both sides really ramped up. People were excited about it. People were talking about it in the streets. And we're not going to get that unless we know how it's going to happen this time round again. So if there's not a clear policy, I think both yes and no are both going to just not be that excited about it, to be honest.
So you don't agree, Ivan, with Humza Yousaf's policy. If you don't have confidence in that policy, do you have confidence in him as a leader? I mean, you supported Kate Forbes in the leadership election.
Well, Humza's a leader, and we all support what he's taken forward as leader of the party. That's clear, and I've no doubt that he'll reflect on the situation we're in after Rutherglen and act accordingly. And I'm looking forward to conference. I think everybody will get behind the party, work together to take forward the agenda we need to take forward. And as Kelly's right, we need to convince more people about the case for independence. And Rachel's right, we need to have clarity on what that process is so that the campaign does get galvanised. People are clear when they get into the general election that Scotland's future is at stake in that election and they know exactly what they're voting for. And we're very clear, frankly, about addressing the issues that were raised on the doorstep in Rutherglen and how we tackle those for the people of Scotland.
And if the party backs the policy of the most seats, would you get behind that then? Yeah,
of course. I mean, if that's what conference decides, that's what we'll take forward as a party.
OK. Kelly, you've said there that you believe in Humza Yousaf as a leader, but Alex Salmond said earlier in the week that he had just days to save his jobs. In the wake of the Rutherglen by-election, you know, how much difficulty is he in?
I don't think the Rutherglen by-election is really an indictment of Humza Yousaf as a leader. I think this has been a difficult...
It was his first kind of test
but
as leader,
it's been a difficult few months for the SNP, and I think Humza Yousaf hasn't really been given a chance yet to really bed in. This is his first conference. We'll see what he brings to the table. I have faith in him, and I don't think Alex Salmond is really a credible source for any information on Humza Yousaf.
How united is the party, Kelly, do you think?
I think the party, and I said this earlier, I think the party since 2014 naturally has splintered off. There's been the splintering of Alba, there's been defections to other parties such as the Green Party, and I think that's been a natural process following the 2014 referendum. I don't think the SNP was far too broad of a church and it was never going to be able to house all of those political opinions under the same roof. I think that's been a natural progression. I think now at this point it's a new era for the party. We're going into the conference this weekend with a fresh perspective and a need to collaborate together, and I think that the SNP is going to do that this weekend.
Rachel, Humza Yousaf isn't the dominant politician that his predecessors, Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond, were.
Well, yeah, I think if you look at Nicola Sturgeon, she was an election powerhouse, and there's so many people within the SNP now who just aren't used to losing because the SNP has been so successful in the previous few years. So it'll be a bit of a shock to a lot of people, the Rutherglen by-election, and so the SNP's really got to now look at what happens next. What do we do now? Because something somewhere in that election campaign hasn't gone right for them.
And how united do you think they are?
I think on the whole, probably it's looking OK, but there are definitely sort of factions. There's obviously we had Fergus Ewing being suspended from the party as well, and there's a few other voices in the backbenches sort of being a little bit critical there. So it'll be interesting to see how well the independence debate at conference on Sunday goes down with membership. I think that will be really key to see how united the party is.
Ivan, there's been discontent voiced by some SNP figures about the Greens' involvement in the Scottish Government. Do you see them as an asset?
I think that there is scope to have a look at the Butte House Agreement again. And review where we're up to with it.
So that's
and what's
a
worked,
no then, you don't think
what hasn't worked. I think there are, it's a different party, they've got a different perspective on many things. We went into that, it was something that was very new, and as I say, I think it's worth us having a look as a party as to where we are with that and if there are aspects of that that would need to be reviewed. OK,
what aspects or what bits of it do you think haven't worked?
Well, we've seen a number of policy areas that obviously haven't been successful. We talk about DRS, for example, where there's general acceptance that that is a good policy objective, but the details of that and the policy itself hasn't worked out as we'd hoped. There are other areas that the Greens have got specific perspective, to talk a lot to the business community, and there's concerns there about the attitude of the Greens. So there's a number of areas where I think, us as a party, it'd be worth us having another look. And I think we're, 2 years into that now, just to understand, is it working for us, is it working for the broader Yes movement, and what is the best approach to take forward, and have those discussions.
Kelly, what do you think about the Greens being in government? Fergus Ewing and Fergus Much, the former head of comms, say get them out now.
I don't agree at all. I think the Greens have actually been a really positive influence on the SNP, and I think I've held them to account on things that I would like to see, things like rent controls, and I think they've actually been a really positive influence in the Scottish Government, and I would like to see the Butte House Agreement upheld.
Rachel, do you see the Butte House Agreement continuing?
There's no talk at the moment of trying to hold that vote that people are talking about to see whether to continue it or not. So I think, yes, it will continue for just now. I think as well, if you look at Holyrood, having the Greens there gives the SNP more support, more backing on certain policies as well. So I think the SNP won't want to lose that. As much as there are people criticising it, they won't want to lose that support either within the chamber.
Ivan, just to come back to what you were saying earlier on the doorsteps in the Rutherglen by-election, what were people saying? Well,
the issues were, it was interesting because there was a lot of people that voted SNP in the past still strongly supporting independence, which is what the polls show. Independence support, I think, is over 50% in the last poll, but had concerns about the SNP at the moment. And those stemmed from concerns about the police investigation in that process, because they believed that the SNP was different from other parties in terms of that. And I think we need to put that to bed, and that's difficult because of the police. But also policies on delivery, on health, on cost of living, very important. We focus on those
to leave it there.
And make those
we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much. And that's all from Scotland Tonight.